Shalom, family. It's been a while, right? No, I'm just joking. Shalom, family, and welcome to Exploring the Motherland, African News with Garth. This is episode 21, Western Desperation, Au Revoir, Colonization. Exploring the Motherland's purpose is to support and promote the mission of Quest to Unite Africa. The mission of Quest to Unite Africa is to create economic development and critical infrastructure for the benefit of the African continent and the diaspora. Exploring the Motherland takes news developments and clips and brings relevance to our mission. And our mission, we use four main strategies: medical, business, cultural engagement, and technological innovation. All four of these pillar strategies all culminate to help us create strategic partnerships to stimulate economic development and critical infrastructure. All right, family, let me just get started. Angola Railway, strategically key to U.S. economy. Biden's three-day trip to Angola starts Monday and will promote the Libido Corridor development in Zambia, Congo, and Angola that he had pushed as a new approach in countering some of China's influence and dominance of Africa's critical minerals. Biden's trip delivers on a pledge to go to Africa during his presidency, but comes right at the term of his presidency, and the future of the Libido project depends on the incoming administration of Donald Trump. The United States has provided $550 million in loan support to this venture, which involves refurbishing an existing railway through Angola and extending it into Congo's mining heartland. As part of the first phase, no date has been given for its completion yet, and all links are in the description. But today I'll just put some of the links in here so you could read along, or if you want to look further, just give me 1 second. Let me just play the video, and I will put the article in the chat. Give me 1 second.
Mineral transportation routes in Central and Southern Africa will be top of the agenda as U.S. President Joe Biden visits Angola on Monday. Supported by the U.S. and the EU, the Libido Atlantic Railway is being touted as a key shipping route for copper and cobalt ore, critical to the energy transition from Zambia and DRC for export to Western markets.
Since the green economy will have a lot more impact on the global economy going forward, if the U.S. has a lead in that, they are most likely going to maintain their global leadership of the global economy. If they don't maintain that, you could argue that the Chinese are likely to then come and overtake the U.S. economy.
The Libido Corridor project also sits at the center of the great power rivalry pitting China and the U.S., according to Chabala. With its Belt and Road Initiative, China has become the biggest investor in African infrastructure.
There should be a lot more trade between Congo and Zambia and the western side of the globe, so to speak. Why do I say the western side? Because presently, most of the critical mineral resources and the strategic minerals are exported out of the eastern side of Africa, mostly through Dar es Salaam, into China and Asia.
With some of the largest mineral reserves in the world, the Democratic Republic of Congo is courting global attention and interest.
whatever. Okay. So basically, United States is making a strategic partnership with Angola to help expand the infrastructure through the DRC, through Zambia, and they claim that this is going to be beneficial because it's going to bring trade into those areas and bring jobs. I mean, that's all a farce. This is just a geopolitical move for the U.S. to try to counteract what influence China already has. You know, they want strategic minerals to keep up with China in greener technologies. These minerals would be copper, cobalt, and lithium, to name a few. This initiative will bring no benefit to the people of Angola, DRC, and Zambia, as Angola is already population is living in 30% of poverty, 30% or more. In Zambia, it's even worse, 60% or more, and the DRC is right around those figures. And you know, the thing is, they could claim that they are doing this to help bring trade and to make the country, you know, prosper by helping their economic development, but that's a lie because, you know, this is just a way for them to make a pipeline to have access to raw materials. If they wanted to, you know, make significant change, they would help build factories and help consult with those factories, consultation and training with the mining industry of those, you know, factories, and they would teach them how to, you know, take the raw materials and then make them into final products, and then they would export them to different countries. Also, they would be able to use those minerals within their own country to build up their infrastructure. So we all know this is just a political jousting. They're just putting on a big show for Angolans to help, bring goodwill as they try to, you know, scam them out of resources. But, you know, this is not going to happen anymore because they are smartening up now.
Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from the southern African nation of Angola, which is being visited by the outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden, with the goal of touting a win against China in the race for Africa. With this visit, Joe Biden delivers on his promise to visit Africa during his presidency. However, he is facing heavy criticism as the 3-day visit comes only at the tail end of his term. In a few weeks from now, he will hand over power to President-elect Donald Trump. Despite criticism, the Biden administration officials say his visit is not too little too late, as it will put the U.S. back on track in Africa after years of being off the field. There have been questions also on Biden's choice of oil-rich Angola as the sole African country to visit over the traditionally closer allies such as Kenya. During his visit, U.S. President Joe Biden will meet his Angolan counterpart, Joe Lourenço, and the two leaders are expected to hold talks and to make announcements on security cooperation, health, security, agribusiness, and cultural ties. The visit by the U.S. president is aimed at highlighting the country's investments in Africa under his watch in the face of China's deepening inroads. Biden's visit marks the first time of a sitting U.S. president to sub-Saharan Africa since 2015. It is also the first time a U.S. president has visited Angola, hosting the African leaders in Washington in 2022. Biden promised to visit the continent the next year, but missed the deadline. He was scheduled to visit Angola in October of this year, but was postponed due to the devastating hurricanes that hit the U.S. Biden's visit focuses on a major U.S.-backed railway project that aims to divert critical minerals away from China. The project, which is partly funded with a U.S. loan, links the resource-rich Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic Ocean. This project will offer a fast and efficient route for exports to the West. At stake are vast supplies of minerals like copper and cobalt, And these minerals that are a key component in batteries and electronics are found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But competition to access resources in the region has been intensifying in recent years. For now, China is the top player in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Beijing also signed an agreement with Tanzania and Zambia earlier this year to revive a rival railway line to Africa's eastern coast. China's investments and influence have far outpaced that of the US under President Xi Jinping. Beijing has poured billions of dollars across Africa into infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. This has become an increasing concern to Washington. Angola has long nurtured close ties with China and Russia, but recently it has moved closer to the West. Luanda has been clear. It says it is open for business. It wants to work with any partner that can advance their agenda to promote economic growth. So it has become an active area of geopolitical rivalry. Beyond this railway project, the US has done little to advance ties with African nations and access vast reserves of minerals across the continent, which Washington says are critical for national security. This as China, Russia, and Gulf nations continue to seize commercial and strategic opportunities. Earlier this year, the US lost a major spy base in Niger and has failed to find an ally that will host these assets. Now, this has left the US without a military foothold in the Sahel region that has become a hotspot of Islamist terrorism. Niger, along with other West African countries, dumped the US-led West and tilted towards Russia, and Moscow has been expanding its footprint in the region, with the junta-ruled states relying on Moscow for security assistance. Competing with China and Russia has remained common on the agenda for both Biden and Trump. This visit by Joe Biden delivers only one of a sweeping set of pledges to Africa. Others remain hollow promises for now. These include gaining 2 permanent seats for Africa at the UN Security Council. And some analysts say that Donald Trump is likely to remain a close partner to Angola when he returns to the Oval Office in January, while others remain skeptical. During his first term, Trump did on this. We have with us Dr. Alex Vines, who is the Director of Africa Program at Chatham House and is joining us live from London in the United Kingdom. Thank you for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Now, how does President Biden's visit to Angola and the focus on the US-backed railway project reflect the broader US strategy to counter China's influence in Africa, particularly in securing these mineral supply chains?
Well, you're right. And as you've described, the Lobito Corridor is part of a Western effort. It's not just the United States, because the European Union, through its Global Gateway project, is funding the Lobito Corridor, as is also the African Development Bank. And so the Lobito Corridor is about accessing the cobalt and particularly the copper from the Democratic Republic of the Congo down to Lobito port. The reality, though, is that although it's funded by the American taxpayer and the European taxpayer and some other financiers, the Lobito Corridor is actually for all minerals going down that corridor for whoever wants to take them down the corridor. And so the beneficiaries to this investment, this uplift of this corridor, are not American companies or mining companies. They are actually Chinese and Canadian ones in the short term. The initial contract to use this particular revitalized line has gone to a Canadian and Chinese company, for example, which mines copper in the DRC. Mm. So although there is geopolitics into this, right, there is actually multipolarity also.
And Doctor, if you're still there, let me ask you another question. What are the economic and the geopolitical implications of diverting Angola's critical minerals away from China, both for Angola and for the African continent as a whole. How might this move influence the regional partnerships and development?
Well,
All right, the link is in the chat for the rest of that video. So I will tell you what is going to happen. This is just a geopolitical jousting, and of course, China is already going to, combat that, and they have. Later on in the show, I will show you how China has responded. And what we need to do is exactly what Prophet Templeton has stated, and your expertise is definitely needed. My wife and I are going to set up a factory in South Africa. I have served as a business consultant and hope to teach others how to set up factories. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to teach and consult our brothers and sisters how to do different things and how to build up different industries and how to take raw materials from one stage and how show them how to turn it into a finished project, so therefore they're able to create a new industry that helps them uh, stimulate economic growth. That's what it's all about. Instead of them doing deals or taking aid from countries that don't want to teach them anything, don't want to empower them to control their own resources, don't have any respect for their sovereignty, and just want to use their country as an export of raw materials for pennies on the dollar. All right. And the next story. On the 11th hour visit to Angola, Biden pledges lasting support to Africa. And we will play this clip now. Basically what he said to the Angolans and the Angolan president.
It's good to see you again. Thank you for having me here today. Sincerely. I joked with you earlier when I said we Bidens are like poor relatives. We show up when we're invited, stay longer than we should.
Man can barely enunciate his speech.
But you've been very, very generous and hospitable. Thank you. I'm proud, excuse me, very proud to be the first American president to visit Angola. And I'm deeply proud of everything we have done together to transform our partnership thus far. There's so much ahead of us, so much we can do. The results so far speak for themselves.
In my recent plan, I recommended delegation to scoot back to Ghana.
And you've heard me say it before, Mr. President. The United States is all in on Africa, all in on Africa. And I think a testament to that assertion I've made to you when I saw you and I've made publicly before. You've heard me say it before, but the United States is all in on Angola. We've already, my administration alone, has invested over $3 billion in Angola thus far. The future of the world is here in Africa, in Angola. So during this visit, I look forward to discussing how we keep ensuring democracy delivers for people, because if they don't think it's a democracy, they don't think they're in on a deal. They don't think they're part of it. And you've been working very hard to establish good democracy. And secondly, how can we help build strong ties between our nations and our businesses and our people? There's a lot to say on all of this, I know. We're prepared to, I think we're well on our way to answering a lot of the questions, but I think you should understand the extent to which we're prepared to be engaged. And as I said to the president, ours is not, we don't think because we're bigger and we're more powerful that we're smarter. We don't think we have all the answers, but we're prepared to hear your answers to the needs you have, particularly answers to international debt financing and a whole range of other things we're prepared to discuss. So
energy, equipment, getting story amongst others, without talking about the only company still running.
Ao realizar esta visita de Estado a Angola, em vésperas de Angola comemorar 50 anos da sua independência nacional, ficará registrada na história de ambos os países como a primeira de um presidente americano a pisar solo angolano. Isto não só enterra um passado das nossas relações, em que no quadro da Guerra Fria nem sempre estivemos alinhados, como também marca um importante ponto de viragem nas nossas relações, que sem sombra de dúvidas conhecerão.
Sorry for the audio, family. I basically wanted to get you to hear what Biden was going to say. And, you know, barely sounds like he's staying awake. So I'm going to stop this video now.
Pretendemos trabalhar juntos.
So basically, Biden's saying, you know, he's all in, you know, given the same old tired, you know, Western ideology about democracy and all this other stuff. It's tired. It's, you know, antiquated, just like his, you know, administration and himself and his overall continence and his overall being. Just give me 1 second. Optimism from Angola President Lourenço working with the United States. Lourenço commends the United States companies who have made investments in the oil and gas sector, and he encourages collaboration on large infrastructure projects. Also, as a sign of good faith and a gesture, Joe Biden will be Joe Biden's administration will be donating $229,000 to renovate the Slavery Museum, which we will talk about more in the next article and into the next story. I mean, that's just hilarious. Like my brother Tony Yahoo was saying, he was talking about reparations and, you know, talking about, it was brother Tony Yahoo who said that the first slaves that came from America were from Angola. And we're going to talk more about that and how that's ironic. And let me see here. And brother Greg says, I was hoping to hear the president of Angola say, you can't be all in on Angola until you are all in on cutting them reparation checks. I mean, yeah. I mean, in a perfect ideal world. And like I said, like I promised, this is China's answer to Biden's trip in live time as it was happening.
Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest on the intensifying rivalry for influence over Africa between two of the world's superpowers, the United States and China. As a part of his term's first and only visit to sub-Saharan Africa, meant to counter China, U.S. President Joe Biden met with his Angolan counterpart, João Lourenço, in Luanda. Biden pledged lasting engagement on Africa's own terms. He reiterated that the United States was all in on Africa, something he also stated during a U.S.-Africa summit in Washington in 2022. The U.S. president also announced more than $1 billion in humanitarian assistance to Africa.
You've heard me say it before, Mr. President. The United States is all in on Africa. All in on Africa. And I think testament to that assertion I've made to you when I saw you and I've made publicly before. You've heard me say it before, but the United States is all in on Angola.
Wealthiest nation in the world to do. And today, I'm announcing over $1 billion in new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from homes by historic droughts and food insecurity.
Joe Biden is the first U.S. president to be visiting Angola, and he said he is very proud of the fact The American president also toured a slavery museum in Angola and spoke about slavery being his country's original sin.
Gentlemen, as you know, I'm in the final weeks of my presidency. You don't have to clap for that. You can if you want. But I wanted to come to Angola. Although I've been chairman of the African Affairs Subcommittee for a long time, I'd never made it to Angola. Because although I don't know exactly what the future will hold, I know the future runs through Angola, through Africa. I mean it sincerely. I'm not kidding. The partnership between Angola and the United States also extends to supporting peace and security in this region and beyond. President Lorenzo, I want to thank him for his leadership in mediation and regional conflicts. I also want to thank him for Angola speaking out against Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. It matters. It matters when leaders speak out.
Ao realizar esta visita de Estado a Angola,
The undertaking of this state visit to Angola on the eve of Angola's commemoration of 50 years of national independence will go down in the history of both countries as the first of an American president to set foot on Angolan soil. This not only buries a past part of our relationship, during which, in the context of the Cold War, we were not always aligned, but also marks an important turning point in our relationship, which will undoubtedly gain a new dynamic from today onward.
But many have questioned Biden's decision to make only one stop in his Africa tour in the oil-rich Angola, leaving out Washington's traditional allies like Kenya. The U.S. president's brief Africa visit is aimed at countering China. In Angola, Biden is showcasing a major infrastructure project. The U.S. is backing a new 1,300-kilometer-long railway project that aims to divert critical minerals away from China. The project, which is partly funded with a U.S. loan, links the resource-rich Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic Ocean. The Lobito project will offer a fast and efficient route for exports to the West.
It's called the Lobito Corridor. We're building railroad lines from Angola to the port of Lobito in Zambia and the DRC, and ultimately all the way to the Atlantic, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. We'll be the first.
I'm sorry, I'll resume the video, but he does sound like he's drunk, right? He can barely even enunciate his words. He sounds incoherent, you know. You heard him say, "Fuh." Well, he said, I'm dedicating $1 billion to those who have been displaced and for security. He couldn't even say food security. Oh my gosh, what a joke.
Transcontinental Railroad in Africa and the biggest American rail investment outside of America.
At stake are vast supplies of minerals like copper and cobalt. These minerals that are a key component in batteries and electronics are found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But competition to access resources in the region has been intensifying in recent years. And the United States' project, which is aimed at countering Chinese investments in Africa, appears feeble. This is because Chinese investments and influence have far outpaced that of the U.S. Beijing has poured billions of dollars across Africa into infrastructure projects under President Xi Jinping's prized Belt and Road Initiative. While Joe Biden made the American pitch for Africa in Angola, Chinese President Xi Jinping already had his trump card ready, and he played it just at the right time. Beijing initiated a free trade policy with 33 African countries. Under this, China will grant duty-free access to 100% of products from 33 of its African partners. The policy, which was announced by Xi Jinping at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in September, aims to improve industrial cooperation between China and its African partners. The Chinese president had also pledged to increase its support to Africa with $51 billion in funding. Additionally, China also pledged to triple the number of infrastructure projects it has in Africa. The United States has done little to advance ties with African nations. While it lost several commercial opportunities to China, the strategic and security ones were lost to Russia. Now, earlier this year, the U.S. lost a major spy base in Niger, leaving it without a military foothold in the Sahel, which has become a hotspot of Islamist terrorism. Niger, along with other West African countries, including the junta-ruled Mali and Burkina Faso, dumped the West and turned to Russia for security. While Joe Biden seems to have taken a fresh step to counter China's influence in Africa, it remains to be seen whether the next U.S. president, Donald Trump, who will be in the White House, is Xi Jinping's decision. Right. Let me jump right in with the questions. How significant is Xi Jinping's decision to implement a free trade policy with 33 African countries? What implications does it have for China's economic and political influence on the continent?
Thank you so much for welcoming me to this program. The first thing I think is going to be important is granting the three countries free trade will be very significant in actually countering the U.S. Influence in Africa. And likely the fact that if China goes ahead and implements what it has actually promised, then this is going to be a very, very, very good game changer, because at first, AGOA, which is the U.S. flagship project in Africa, has about 3 sub-Saharan countries.
Yeah.
And of course, it has been very significant. But at the moment, China has not yet been able to do that. So if this decision by the Chinese president is going to be, then it's going to have serious implications in terms of trade. More Africans will want to trade with China directly compared to the previous years.
Right. So with President Biden's $1 billion humanitarian assistance and his meeting with the Angolan president, do you feel that this is a meaningful step toward regaining U.S. influence in Africa, or does it simply pale in comparison to China's long-term strategic investments?
I think, first of all, when you talk about 1 billion humanitarian.
All right, family. You could watch the rest of the video, and I put it in the chat there. But yeah, you see, this is China's direct this is China's answer to what President Joe Biden is doing in Angola and in Africa as a whole. So, you see, Biden's all in. All right, so let's get to the next story, family. All right, let's do it. You work this thing again? Oh, wait, give me a second. U.S. President Biden visits slavery museum in Angola.
On his first visit to Angola, the outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden toured the slavery museum in Luanda and inspected shackles and whip, but also addressed Africa's future. Biden reassured U.S. commitment in strengthening its relations with Angola.
We're gathered at a solemn location because to fully consider how far our two countries have come in our friendship, we have to remember how it began. We hear them in the wind and the waves. Young women, young men, born free in the highlands of Angola, only to be captured, bound, and forced on a death march along this very coast to this spot by slave traders in the year 1619. In the building next to us, they were baptized into the foreign faith against their will. Their names changed against their will to Anthony and Isabella. Then they were condemned to a slave ship bound for the Middle Passage, packed together in hundreds by hundreds. It was the beginning of slavery in the United States. Cruel, brutal, dehumanizing. Our nation's original sin, one that haunted America and cast a long shadow ever since.
Biden had promised to visit sub-Saharan Africa last year after reviving the U.S.-Africa summit in 2022, but the trip was delayed until this year, enforcing a sentiment among Africans that their continent is still a low priority for Washington.
Give me a second, family. So, yeah, so you heard it. America's our original sin. Well, family, you heard it. Biden visited the slave museum. Biden's visit continues to highlight failed cultural engagement. There is no real there is no real apology for the past transgressions of the United States. Furthermore, colonialism has negatively affected the cultural history of Angolans. Biden didn't say sorry or elaborate on how U.S. foreign policy diminished Angolans to property and chattel. Slavery has robbed them of sovereignty and any type of hope for an economic future. Henceforth, the people now understand that the United States don't respect them as a sovereign nation and never will. They understand their relationship with the United States and the West is predicated on abuse and exploitation. Biden stressed how the United States, which were once linked by the horrors of enslaved human beings, now could increasingly be linked by economic opportunity. So you hear, family, there's no real repentance. There's no real apology. There's no real, how do you say, reparations. So, this is all doomed to fail. Let me play the next video. Give me a second here.
The United States continues to be the world's largest provider of humanitarian aid and development assistance. That's going to increase. That's the right thing for the wealthiest nation in the world to do. And today, I'm announcing over $1 billion in new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from homes by historic droughts and food insecurity. The partnership between Angola and the United States also extends to supporting peace and security in this region and beyond. President Lorenzo, I want to thank him for his leadership in mediation and regional conflicts. I also want to thank him for Angola speaking out against Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. It matters. It matters when leaders speak out.
Well, the link is in The chat family, thank you. Now let's get to the next story now. All right. Just give me a second here. Oh man, this technology is getting crazier and crazier. Oh, give me a second here. Oh gosh. Okay, enough of that. Chad's Debbie says military pact with France was outdated. Bonjour. Bonsoir. Bonjour, family. And I will put the link in this chat. Give me 1 second here. Where is it? Here we go. Au revoir, colonization. Oops. Oh man, I may be doing Joe Biden a little hard. Forgive me. that's the wrong link. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, this is the link. Okay, as it says, Chad's Debbie says military pact with France was outdated. Chad's president, Mohamed Deby, said the decision to terminate the country's military pact with France was taken because it had become outdated. In his first public remarks since the surprise announcement last week, in a speech delivered late on Sunday, Deby said the pact no longer aligned with Chad's security or geopolitical needs. Chad has struggled with jihadist insurgency for over a decade, and backing by French and U.S. troops has failed to bring stability.
It has been asked to get out of Chad. Chad is a country in Central Africa. It was once a French colony, like a lot of other African nations. Chad became autonomous on 28 November 1958, and it became fully independent 2 years later in 1960. But the 28th of November is still a special date in Chad. It marks an important step towards freedom, which is why Chad chose yesterday, the 28th of November, to break with France again. Their government put out this notice. It terminated a defense agreement. The agreement allowed France to deploy troops in Chad. But now Chad has torn it up, which means French troops deployed there will have to leave. There are 1,000 French soldiers deployed here. They will have to start packing up soon. But how did this happen? What led to this? Look at the timing. The French foreign minister has just concluded his visit to Chad. He met with Chad's president, Mohamed Deby. We don't know what they discussed, but right after that meeting, Chad tore up the defense pact. Their foreign minister said, and I'm quoting, France must now also consider that Chad has grown up, matured, and is a sovereign state that is very jealous of its sovereignty. It's an understandable reason why should Western powers station their troops in former colonies. Imagine if the British left thousands of soldiers in India. If British troops remained here decades after India's independence, it wouldn't have been acceptable to us. So we do understand wanting to guard sovereignty, but this is only one part of the story. There are two more. To understand the second part, we need to zoom in. France had many colonies in Africa. Let's show you a belt stretching from Chad all the way to Mauritania. All these former colonies hosted French troops. They were all part of a security grouping called the G5 Sahel. All these former French colonies were dealing with a common problem, terrorism. That was France's justification to deploy troops. But they failed to fix the problem. They failed to contain the terrorist groups. So slowly, the African nations started getting annoyed. 3 of them recently had coups: Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Their militaries overthrew the civilian governments, and then they kicked out the French troops as well. These coup-hit Sahel nations blame France for their terror problem. They say the French troops were not doing enough. And ordinary people seem to agree because anti-France sentiment has been brewing in the Sahel. It's prevalent in Chad as well. And this may have contributed to the government's decision. The third and the last reason for this break may have been Russia. Moscow has been courting African nations, especially former French colonies. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have all switched allies. They kicked out the French and they brought in the Russians. Russian mercenaries to help the military juntas. And Chad has a similar situation. President Mehmet Deby is the son of a military dictator. His father, Idris Deby, ruled for 30 years. Mehmet took over after he died. He orchestrated a coup and then held what is called a questionable election to consolidate power. So Deby may also want some Russian support to shore up his legitimacy. Russia has been reaching out to Chad. They've signed a few deals, and a broader alliance is definitely possible. All these factors have influenced Chad's latest move: the desire for sovereignty, the anti-France sentiment, and the desire for Russian support. Chad was France's last stronghold in the Sahel. Now it has fallen. And France's troubles may not be over yet. There are rumblings from another former French colony, Senegal. Senegal's president has also taken aim at French troops. He says their time is almost up. So it looks like things will get worse for Paris in the days to come.
The people of Chad put security at the forefront of importance in their country. As a result, they see that French no longer aligns with their cultural principles or beliefs. Just like Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, who also wanted to secure their borders from insurgents, have left Western foreign aid and foreign troops and have kicked them out of their country. Chad no longer sees the value in a strategic relationship with France and seeks initiatives that will help them preserve and strengthen their own sovereignty. As you said, the Chad president said, he said, Chad is no longer a child and has grown up. And what popped in my mind was, when I was a child, I thought as a child. That saying, we all know where that comes from. And we just continue to see that the West, France in particular, is literally, they are no longer relevant, so to speak.
In a historic announcement that has sent ripples through global geopolitics, Chad declared it is terminating its military cooperation agreement with its former colonial ruler, France. This bold move signals a seismic shift in the balance of power in Africa and challenges France's dwindling influence in the Sahel region. With France hosting approximately 1,000 soldiers and warplanes in Chad, the decision marks the end of an era for one of France's last strongholds in the Sahel. Why has Chad, a nation that once worked closely with Western forces, chosen this moment to redefine its alliances? Chadian Foreign Minister Abdourahmane Koulibaly, in a press briefing on Thursday, described France as an essential partner, but emphasized Chad's determination to assert its sovereignty. Chad has grown up, matured, and is a sovereign state that is very jealous of its sovereignty, Koulibaly declared. The statement came just hours after a meeting between Chadian President Mohamed Idriss Déby and French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, making the announcement's timing even more striking. Could this be the final straw in France's waning influence in Africa?
I think so.
This decision by Chad follows a broader trend in the Sahel region, where France has been ousted from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger over the past 2 years. France's declining presence in Africa, particularly in the Sahel, stems from a combination of historical grievances, strategic missteps, and the rise of alternative global partners. For decades, France maintained a stronghold in the region through its military operations, economic ties, and cultural influence, but this dominance has eroded due to growing perceptions of neo-colonialism. Many Sahelian states, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, now view France as exploitative rather than supportive, citing unequal partnerships where the benefits skew heavily in France's favor. These countries have criticized France for extracting resources like uranium, oil, and gold while offering little in return to uplift local economies. Furthermore, France's counterterrorism efforts, such as Operation Barkhane, have been widely criticized for failing to contain Islamist insurgencies, leaving behind insecurity and resentment. Leaders in the Sahel increasingly see these operations as a cover for maintaining control rather than fostering genuine collaboration. The rise of anti-French sentiment has been fueled by both grassroots movements and political elites who accuse France of meddling in domestic affairs to protect its economic interests. This discontent has paved the way for countries to explore alternative alliances with Russia, China, and Turkey, who present themselves as more respectful and mutually beneficial partners. Ultimately, France's inability to adapt to Africa's evolving demand for sovereignty and equality has made its presence less palatable, forcing it into an unprecedented retreat. Chad was the last Sahel nation hosting French forces, and it is now poised to join this wave of realignment. To understand this pivot, one must delve into Chad's strategic importance and natural resources. Chad, a landlocked nation in Central Africa, is strategically positioned and resource-rich, boasting significant oil reserves, uranium, and other valuable minerals. These resources have historically attracted foreign powers, including France, which maintained a strong military and economic presence in the country. However, much like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, Chad has grown increasingly disillusioned with France's involvement, often viewing it as exploitative rather than supportive. In Niger, for instance, France heavily depended on uranium for its nuclear energy sector while offering little tangible development for the local population, a pattern echoed across the Sahel. Similarly, in Mali and Burkina Faso, France's focus on resource extraction and perceived political interference led to widespread anti-French sentiment. Chad's decision to sever military ties with France aligns with this regional trend, as it seeks to assert its sovereignty and redefine partnerships that better serve its national interests.
All right, family. I just put in the chat the video link for this video, and as we speak, African News reports, hundreds of Chadians demonstrate for the departure of France. Hundreds of people demonstrated in Chad on Friday, this literally just happened an hour ago, to demand the withdrawal of French troops from the country a week after the Central African country ended a military agreement with its former colonizer. And some of these quotes, we no longer want the French presence in Chad, said former Minister of Public of Health, Dr. Hissène Massar. This protest will end when the French leave. So they're already demonstrating and they want to expedite this process as soon as possible. You could read that whenever you get the chance, but that's just a live update to what we were just witnessing. All right, and the last but least, the next story. Senegal's leader says France should close all army bases in country.
As Senegal prepares to mark the 80th anniversary of a massacre by the French colonial army, the country's president has called for better relations with France.
As we approach the 65th anniversary of our independence, the French authorities must also consider having a partnership that is without military presence, one that is rich and fruitful, a privileged and global partnership, as we have with many other countries.
However, Faye assured that he is not looking to cut ties with France.
The desire to move towards the absence of a military presence, not just from France, but from any other country, should not be interpreted as a desire to cut all relations with France.
The president's statement comes ahead of the December 1st anniversary of the mass killing of Senegalese soldiers known as the Thiaroye massacre, On Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged that his country's troops were responsible for the massacre, a statement that Faye called a great step.
There are steps we are taking, and the decision to commemorate has given France today the opportunity, as it has never done before, to acknowledge that this was a massacre.
France's influence in Western Central Africa has been declining, with the country losing its impact in former French colonies. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have expelled French forces. This year, 2 French government sources said the country was looking to cut its military presence in Africa. Caroline B., CGTN.
That's exactly what I see, Brother Tony Yaho. There's some treachery afoot. As the president said, he doesn't want to completely cut ties, but that's what he's going to do, because the French are not going to do business with them as long as they don't have bases there. I don't think he understands that, but hey. And let me just give some context with this article, and it's in the chat. Senegal has called for full access to the archives of the Thiaro massacre as experts want transparency about one of the darkest chapters in colonial history. Senegal's new government is determined to ensure the events is remembered, and ceremony was held at the CRA military camp to honor the victims. The massacre took place on December 1st, 1944, when the French army opened pew-pew on the African soldiers who were demanding pay. And basically it said that Macron wasn't there to, say his condolences, but he acknowledged it was a massacre after decades of state lies where France, in a shameful move, accused these soldiers of mutiny to justify the pew-pews and the deletions. But even this acknowledgement of one of the greatest colonial deletions in our history was not enough to get him to attend the ceremony. The debate continues. Senegal pushes for recognition and full transparency on the colonial tragedy. And again, that link is in the chat. And this other article basically highlights some of the statements he made. Give me 1 second. And yeah, I mean, earlier, yeah, I do like First Post because they get to the point and they're pretty, neutral. Senegal leader calls France to close military bases on colonial massacre anniversary. President Bassirou Diomaye Faye has called for the closure of French military bases in Senegal ahead of the upcoming 80th anniversary of the said tragedy. In an interview AFP on Thursday, Faye said that France's military presence in Senegal is incompatible with country's sovereignty. Sovereignty does not allow for foreign military presence on our soil. Senegal is an independent country, but that doesn't mean we sever ties with our partners. China, for example, is our largest trading partner today, and yet does not maintain a military presence here. That is very true, but you cannot play both sides, in my opinion. France remains an important partner for Senegal, both economically and in terms of the many French nationals living here. Yeah. Chad has grown up. No, this is a different quote, but basically this next video and last video I'll show you basically highlight some of the critiques and remarks they made. I mean, he could say that they don't want to completely cut ties with France, but he has to understand that they're not never gonna respect your sovereignty. So that notion that you want to continue business as long as they, respect your sovereignty is basically an ultimatum that they will not follow.
In a seismic declaration that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of global power, Senegal's newly elected president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, has demanded the immediate closure of French military bases in his nation. This move, hailed as a historic reclamation of African sovereignty, comes as the continent wrestles with the long shadow of colonialism and the lingering presence of foreign powers who still see Africa as their playground. Speaking with resolute clarity from the presidential palace, Faye delivered a message that could rewrite the narrative of Africa's relationship with the West. Senegal is an independent, sovereign nation, and sovereignty is incompatible with the presence of foreign military bases. The days of domination are over. This provocative stance challenges not only France, but also the broader global order, exposing the hypocrisy of Western nations that preach independence and democracy while maintaining military strongholds across Africa. Faye's announcement coincides with the 80th anniversary of the Thiaroye Massacre, a brutal and rarely acknowledged episode in France's colonial history. On December 1, 1944, French troops massacred Senegalese soldiers who had returned home after fighting for France in World War II. These soldiers, who dared to demand their rightful pay, were slaughtered in cold blood, a heinous act that still scars Senegal's national memory. While French President Emmanuel Macron recently admitted responsibility for this atrocity in a letter to Faye, his gesture was dismissed by many as performative. Macron's failure to attend the commemoration personally underscores the West's reluctance to truly confront its colonial sins. To recognize
Just a quick comment here. Like, the president of Senegal has to understand he can't, the president of France doesn't even want to come to look you in the eye and say sorry and acknowledge what they've done in their transgression. So how can he say at the same time that he wants to continue to do business with the French? That's the only problem I have with it. Someone even said it in the chat. It's like Senegal's not really all in. They're still trying to play both sides. As Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso knows who the enemy is and has done all they could to, seek determination of their people and to cut off, the French, because they know that they are liars and that they don't mean any goodwill, nor do they want to do any strategic partnerships that benefit them or their country or respect their sovereignty. It's pretty much that simple.
A massacre is one thing. To make amends is another, Faye asserted, signaling that Senegal might demand reparations. Recognition must lead to accountability. The era of empty apologies is over. Senegal's decision to reject French military bases resonates across a continent increasingly weary of neo-colonialism. From Mali to Niger, African nations are turning away from their former colonial masters, pivoting towards partnerships that prioritize mutual respect over subjugation. Unlike its neighbors, however, Senegal is charting a uniquely diplomatic path. Faye made it clear that this is not a severance of ties with France, but a redefinition of the relationship. Today, China is Senegal's largest trading partner. They invest without occupying. Why can't France do the same? This comparison cuts deep, exposing the stark difference in how global powers engage with Africa. It raises a provocative question. Why does France and the West at large need a military footprint to maintain partnerships? Faye's declaration throws down the gauntlet to Western powers who have long treated Africa as a pawn in their geopolitical games. The presence of French troops, not only in Senegal but across the Sahel, symbolizes a refusal to let go of imperial ambitions. It raises an unsettling question. Is Africa truly free, or is it still shackled by a more subtle form of colonialism? This decision is a wake-up call to African nations still clinging to the vestiges of Western dependency. It challenges the continent to redefine its alliances, prioritize sovereignty and forge a future unburdened by the ghosts of colonialism. Faye's bold move has ignited fierce debate. Critics argue that pushing out French forces could destabilize Senegal, leaving a vacuum for other foreign powers, such as Russia or China, to exploit. Supporters, however, see this as the dawn of a new Pan-African era, where African nations finally take their rightful place as equals on the global stage. This is more than just Senegal's fight. It's Africa's fight. It's a challenge to every nation that still hosts foreign military bases, to every leader who still bends to Western whims, and to every global power that refuses to respect African sovereignty. President Faye has set the stage for a revolution, not with weapons, but with words. The world is watching, and the question is clear. Will Africa rise to reclaim its destiny, or will it remain a pawn in a game it didn't choose to play? The choice, as Faye has made clear, is Africa's, and the time is now. Your perspective matters. Do you think other African countries should follow Senegal's bold example and kick?
There you go. That's French, right? Yes, of course. Of course they should, kick out imperialists. And, yep, I literally can't say it any better, Brother T. China has mastered the art of soft power. Make it seem like you are you give them a little bit of a better deal. You acknowledge their sovereignty somewhat, but that sleight of hand is still there. Well, and that's all I have, family. And I'm going to tell you to enjoy your Shabbat. And for those who are on the East Coast, please stay warm. It's 30 degrees in Jersey. And, it's 30 degrees in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. I think some parts in the South, it's like freezing. It's this time of the year. So everyone stay warm and enjoy your Shabbat Shalom. Well, actually, no. I repent from doing that sign. All right. See you all. Thank you for joining the show, and I hope you enjoy it and catch you on the replay. Also, let me do this. Please help Quest to Unite Africa. The link is in the chat, and please help support. Thank you, family, again, for all that you do and for empowering us all for this time that we all have been brought up in to be a part of, and we were destined to be. And Cynthia is funny. She said I look like a young LeVar Burton. Okay, I'll take it. All right, I'm out. See you later. Take care, family.